The November 25th, 2019 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Baroth. Here. Chairman Brew.
Here.
Ms. DeFlorio. Here. Mr. Flagler Mitchell is excused. Mr. Howland is excused. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Wilt. Here. President Carbone.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
There is not.
Is there anyone present who has not signed up to speak who would like to address the committee at this time? I would like to introduce Robert Franklin, Chief Financial Officer of the Finance Department, who is here to present the 2020 proposed Monroe County budget as it pertains to the Environment and Public Works Committee. We will have a question and answer period following the presentation. Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The 2020 budget presentation as it pertains to the Committee on Environment and Public Works. There are several areas, as there are every year, pertinent to this committee. Our departments of aviation, solid waste, engineering, pure waters, and the DES division, fleet maintenance. If I can turn your attention to our Department of Aviation, overall airport appropriations have grown by about 18%, pretty big number, but really that is largely due to the new debt service, roughly $3.8 million, for the airport revitalization project. Absent that increase in debt service, the appropriations would have been almost equal to what they were in 2019. And I will point out that as an enterprise fund, the department's appropriations are fully funded by airport-generated revenues. No net county support is required regarding this enterprise fund. Turning to environmental services and our enterprise fund for solid waste. Appropriations for proposed for 2020 have been reduced by about $822,000, of which $468,000 is attributable to lower debt service. We've worked really hard over the past couple years to drive down that debt service. The other part of the reduction, about $354,000, come from reduced spending on a variety of contractual services. Some of those reductions are sustainable, others will be added back in future budgets. Now, prior to 2015, the solid waste fund had been losing roughly $2 million to $3 million annually. Since 2015, however, and working very closely with the department director, Director Garland, that fund has had 4 consecutive years of operating surpluses, and the last 3 of which also improved the fund's year-end net position. This year, 2019, however, has been a bit of a struggle, and it's looking at this point that the fund may actually just break even. There are significantly lower revenues from the sales of electricity at our gas plant. There is a significant shortfall in our landfill royalty revenue. We are seeing an increase in fuel costs and an increase in our tire disposal expenses. Those issues have been tackled in the budget process for 2020, but above and beyond that, the solid waste fund has accumulated a fund deficit of roughly $18.9 million. And I think, as you all know, that fund owes the general fund roughly $20.5 million. The good news is that the county is finally in a position in which it can do something about that deficit and that interfund receivable. This is important because the deficit within the solid waste fund has been a drag on Monroe County's bond rating for several years. And by committing this year to a solvency plan, this legislative body can alleviate that drag and actually solve that issue in perhaps 10 years. We should have more conversations about that later. Looking at our engineering and facilities management, the proposed budget is close to 17% higher than 2019 adopted. Again, a significant increase, but that is largely due to a cost increase in running our Iola powerhouse and in funding additional appropriations for building maintenance. The topic of adequate funding for building maintenance has come up in prior year budget conversations, especially in the last 2 budget cycles. So on top of the department's regular budget requests, we've added another $200,000 specifically for our Civic Center complex, our county office building, City Place, Westfall Road, our St. Paul Street location, and the Monroe County Crime Lab. Turning our attention to our Pure Waters districts, appropriations for Pure Waters have actually come down for 2020, about $5.6 million, roughly 7%, a very nice decrease. $3.6 million of that reduction is related to lower debt service, and that was accomplished strategically by manning our capital improvement program and moving annually recurring projects to a cash capital funding basis. That's a good thing. 10 years or so ago, annual debt service within Pure Waters was around $11 million. And every year since then, that has been creeping up to an unsustainable $19 million the past couple years. So looking at next year's reduction of $3.6 million, that definitely provides this legislative body some needed budgetary relief. And right now, that relief is projected to continue on into 21 and 22. You will also no doubt notice a reduced amount for salaries and benefits. It's about $1.5 million combined. The districts have been incurring lower personnel-related costs over the past several years, so this seemed like an appropriate time to right-size the appropriation and correspondingly reduce that fund's use of fund balance. Mr. Chairman, that really concludes the presentation. More than happy to answer questions at the administrative table.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I will now open the floor to any committee members who have questions regarding the Environment and Public Works portion of the budget. Legislator DeFlorio.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration. Just one quick question on in the environmental services budget on page 119, the decrease in revenue projections for solid waste tipping fees. Explain
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chairman. The reduction in solid waste tipping fees primarily is a specific reduction to force net county support requirement of $2 million. I would be happy to explain that a little further, Mr. Chairman. As discussed in a number of prior year budget committees, we often use solid waste tipping fees as the final revenue source to balance the fund. In many years, it takes a slight adjustment upward, or even in some years, a slight adjustment downward to balance that fund. In order to provide, from a budget perspective, a general fund subsidy of $2 million, it was best to effectuate that by reducing the revenue for solid waste tipping fees by $2 million. When we reduce revenues lower than budgeted appropriations, the result is a required net county support. That net county support of $2 million is, in my opinion, the best means to effectuate a reduction of the solid waste fund's accumulated deficit and a means to repay the general fund much more quickly. Much more quickly, Mr. Chairman, more like the tune of 10 years versus, say, 35 years.
Thank
Legislator Bafucci.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration. I have a question about when we send our information to the comptroller's office, there's almost a $21 million charge that's estimated for Pure Water's capital. Yet, it doesn't appear to be part of net county support. So how is that reconciled?
Mr. Chairman, two things about that. One, in all frankness, this county could do a little better job balancing the O&M related piece of revenue versus the capital piece of revenue. Combined, those revenue streams meet the needs of budgeted appropriations. From year to year, what we charge for O&M versus what we charge for capital could run a little higher than it should be or a little lower than it should be. But that's generally okay because once the tax bills are sent out, it's not like the funds are segregated between O&M and capital. They are commingled. It's only when funds are transferred to a capital fund do they become restricted and designated. The other answer to that question, Mr. Chairman, regarding net county support, Pure Water's taxing districts are self-balancing, and the intent of Pure Water's districts is to charge sufficient assessments to meet their operating and capital needs and not require any subsidy from the general fund. So, Mr. Chairman, net county support should be zero in each budget book.
Through the chair to the administration. I think I understand that. So we're charging taxpayers $21 million for capital work at Pure Waters. And I'm okay. Thank you.
I think I know the answer to the question, Mr.
I think
Chairman.
I'm okay. Thank you. I'm trying to reconcile that with my school stuff. It's kind of interesting. Thank you.
Legislator Baroff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the administration, I got some questions I'd like to ask, but I want to start off with the presentation, a few clarifications with that. Mr. Franklin, and first, thank you so much for doing the presentation. I know you've done this for 4 or 5 years now, and it's been very educational every time.
7, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
How many years?
7, Mr.
7
Chairman.
years. Time flies, but thank you. You mentioned regarding the engineering facilities management that building maintenance was going to include a top-on fee of $200,000 for maintenance of a number of different places. Was that $200,000 total or per the site?
In total, Mr. Chairman.
In total. And with the, you listed, 6 major ones. Out of curiosity, how much of that is for the county office building, through the chair?
Mr. Chairman, we added an additional $41,500, bringing the total budget to $50,000, specifically for the county office building.
Thank you very much. And then I'll just go back to my other prepared questions. I'm going to start off with aviation. On page 78, the second major achievement, did the executing of new use and lease agreements that save the airlines money cost us anything?
Through the chair, no, it did not.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, could you please describe not just the glycol recovery vehicle that we now have, but what do we do, or did we not do, to recover glycol in the past, through the chair?
Through the chair, the glycol recovery vehicle was funded through FAA passenger facility charges, and that vehicle basically sucks up the glycol that is sprayed on the airplanes during inclement weather, such as snow and ice type weather that they experience out there on the ramps, and then it is discharged into a holding container on the west side of the airfield, and then appropriately sent to Van Leer in a timely manner, which is acceptable to Van Leer's processes. Beforehand, it went into basically a drain that it designated areas in the ramps, and then it went from there right to Van Leer, and there was no coordination or no real control, thank you, no real control of how much discharge went to the Van Leer facility within a certain period of time. So that caused a lot of problems with the Van Leer treatment plant in treating the increase in flow of those de-icing fluids. This better is more efficient and more environmentally friendly.
Thank you, that makes sense. Through the chair of the administration, I seem to recall in past years, and I'm thinking about 5 years ago, we actually funded the construction of, I want to call it, catch basins for the glyco that we did in the past. Is that correct? We actually spent money to do this, to create these spots on the runway to collect this stuff in the past?
Through the chairman, I'm sorry, could the legislator, I just missed what you were saying. I guess I just misunderstood the question. Could you repeat that one more time?
Through the chair, yes. The legislature has approved construction projects in the past, I want to think 5 years ago, to develop catch basins on the tarmac someplace to catch things like glycol. And my question is this purchase of a new vehicle going to replace the need for those, the maintenance of such catch basins?
Through the chairman, yes, it should.
Okay, so I guess my real question then is, how much did this glyco recovery vehicle cost? Through the chair.
Through the chairman, I don't have that exact amount. I believe it was in the range of $600,000 to $800,000.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, is this the sort of thing that's been around for a while, or is this a new vehicle? Through the chair.
Through the chairman, this vehicle will be around for roughly 15 to 20 years.
I'm sorry, what I meant to say was, is this a sort of technology that's been available for us to utilize in the past, or is it a relatively new technology?
Through the chairman, this is relatively new technology that's really coming across through airports across the nation in cold weather climates. 5 years ago, this type of vehicle did not exist, but today it is out on the market. I believe there's multiple vendors now in the market, and it's becoming more and more cost productive.
Thank you, and that's an excellent answer. I appreciate that very much. Also on page 78 of the 2019 major objectives, one of them is to, quote, achieve zero discrepancy FAA Part 139 certification inspection, the most important airport certification. And then it goes on to describe how aggressively important that is. This was also an objective for 2020. Have we achieved this inspection rating or no, through the chair?
Through the chair, thank you for asking. This is the annual FAA airport certification inspection on the airfield and in the fire department. I am very proud and happy to report that that inspection took place last week. I met with the FAA inspector on Friday afternoon, and Rochester did receive a perfect 100 score. The first time the Rochester Airport has received that score in over 2 decades.
Congratulations, that's excellent news. I'm very happy about that. That's exciting, seriously, that really is pretty exciting stuff. Of course, the challenge is to maintain it for next year, I'm just saying. Okay, thank you for that answer, I appreciate it. So the answer to my question was, yes, indeed, we did, good. There was another objective for 2020 that was also an objective for 2019, and that was to develop a commercial ground transportation operations policy for the Rochester Airport. Has progress been made on this, and if so, could you please describe how we've been progressing? Through the chair.
Yes, through the chairman, that is a priority moving into 2020. As everybody knows, the world of transportation network systems, or TNCs, transportation network companies, keeps increasing every year. That's the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, and even some offsets that start up at airports and other cities across the country. So we're experiencing increase in those, and we need to just put together a policy moving forward that coordinates the Uber and Lyft's proper places for pickups and deliveries, but also coordinates proper pickup and delivery with airport shuttles and livery service that is privately funded, whether it's taxis or just limo and shuttles, but also airport shuttle services from area hotels. From time to time, it does not happen every day. I just want to be clear on that. But you have banks of flights that will depart or banks of flights that will arrive all within about 45 minutes of each other, and it does cause congestion on the airport roadways. And so we need to keep traffic moving. We've identified that in 2019. We're starting to work on that policy as we speak, but that will be one of the priorities moving into 2020, is to have a policy in place that works for all the different entities involved in the transportation of passengers to and from the airport.
Thank you. And through the chair of the administration, I realize this is very complicated. I'm not going to ask for a great explanation of it, except to say, as you work on this policy, do you anticipate implementation occurring towards the end of the year, the middle of the year? What do you suspect would be the timeline for an actual policy to be completed and then implemented?
Through the chair, I expect to have a policy in place sometime within the next 6 months.
Excellent, thank you. On page 80, I just want to check, with the appropriations by division, there's an increase of about, we'll call it $3 million in administration. And I just want to check, is that concurrent or the same thing as the increase of $3 million in debt service from appropriations by object through the chair?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And then, this is my last question, I'm pretty sure, on aviation. Under performance measures, on page 83, we anticipate seeing an increase in the screening area responses. And I know that there was an increase as the airport renovations went on, but why is there an increase again occurring is the question through the chair.
One of the reasons, through the chair, one of the reasons why we kept the number consistent is because now the sheriff's office at the airport is right in the center screening checkpoint. Beforehand, it wasn't designated in that particular location, so the sheriffs have the ability to address even more issues that arise at the checkpoint in a timely manner, a much better timely manner. And as security becomes tighter and tighter at airports, depending on world events, the reason to involve law enforcement, if there's even any hint of any type of foul play or anything suspicious, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, which is our law enforcement entity at the airport, is right there and can address those situations as quick as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I misspoke. I do have one more question on aviation, and that's on page 695. There's a new passenger facility charge. It hasn't been reported before. It's going from 0 to $2.25 million. Where was that previously in the budget, through the chair?
Through the chairman, the passenger facility charge was approved back in 2018, as the airport renovation project was underway.
So it's a new charge through the chair.
Through the chair, that is correct. I will verify that, but I believe that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. That would explain why it shows up like that. Okay, moving on to environmental services. Just in general, I looked at the number of positions of FTEs, and we're down 6.5 positions from environmental services. From which divisions did these reductions occur? I'm sorry, I could not hear. Pure Waters. Thank you very much. And on page 116, and actually to 117, so the major accomplishments, I just wanted to ask, we initiated a contract with the densified expanded polystyrene, which I really love. Who is the, no, seriously, that is a huge deal. I mean, I agree, that was last year. But who is the buyer, and what are the general terms? I mean, how long do we have this contract for? How much income do we expect to achieve, if any, that sort of thing?
Through the chair, we're still working through the details with purchasing on that RFP, but we expect there will be a buyer for the material that's being processed.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, we don't know who that buyer is for sure yet, or is that still up for air, or what?
Through the chair, we're still developing the RFP to be sent out for response.
So it hasn't been developed yet. Okay, thank you.
The chair, that's correct.
So through the chair of the administration, do you have an idea of how much we're talking about, at least in terms of, I don't know, tons, square foot, whatever, how would we measure it?
Through the chair, in 2019, so far, we've created 20 pallets of densified material. And as you might recall, that's about a 60-to-1 reduction. So you could multiply that by 60, and that's what the size of the undensified material would be. So we're making good progress. We have plenty of backlog. It's roughly 13,000 pounds. And so we're very pleased with the performance of the equipment.
So just to follow up through the chair, you mentioned there's plenty of backlog, so we have much more work to be done, many more pallets to be densified?
Through the chair, the Eco Park has been successful for residents in disposing of their clean block styrofoam. So we are able to stage it there. We have the space at the Eco Park, and the equipment is situated next to the storage area. And again, we will process that material
Okay.
in a continuous basis.
Okay, I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you very much. In terms of the major objective for 2019 was, from last year, was to complete the construction of the Hall of Justice Courtroom Improvement Project. That did occur, correct, through the chair? This is engineering and facilities management.
Through the chair, in the 2020 objectives, we have an objective there that stated complete the construction of the Hall of Justice Courtroom Improvement Project. That is scheduled to go out to bid in January.
Okay, so it didn't get done, okay, but it's on track to be done this year, correct, through the chair?
Through the chair, I'm looking at our objectives for 2019. And I don't believe we had listed it there.
No, I thought you just said there was, it was one of the objectives of 2020 now.
Oh,
Yes.
through the chair, yes, it's an objective for 2020 to, I understand. It will go out to bid, so it's been designed in 19. It'll go to bid and construction in 2020.
Okay,
And
thank you very
completed in
much.
2020.
Okay, moving on to the page, well, the same page for Pure Waters. I just want to ask, one of the 2020 major objectives is to award the construction of the FEDWRF Electrical System Improvements Project, which was an objective of 2019. What happened with that project through the chair?
In 2019, we awarded the electrical design portion of that project. We expect to go into construction, award construction contracts in 2020.
Okay, thank you. Just a general question. There are no fleet services major accomplishments or 2020 major objectives. Is there a reason why not, through the chair? They were included in last year's proposal.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is a reason. We took those out. It's a very small division with environmental services between $200,000 and $400,000, and not every division can be reported on. And given the fact that they had the same goals and objectives for the past couple of years, I didn't feel the need to keep repeating them. In all sincerity, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
I believe. I'm just kind of bummed, is all, because, you know, these are, a couple of years from now, we won't have the institutional memory to know what's been going on, so it's just, having a track record is a good thing. Okay. You already answered my question about debt service being down by $5 million, which is awesome. I do appreciate that. I did have a question, however, about the solid waste revenue side. So if you go to page 120, it was noticed earlier and you discussed about how the tipping fees are down $2 million. And essentially, my understanding is that's an artificial way of ensuring we can pay down the debt in a quicker fashion. Is that a correct interpretation through the chair?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. But I also looked at the revenue from sale of energy and other revenues in general. And not only, we're not just down like, you know, about 50% from last year amended. If you go back a couple more years, literally the 5-year trend on sale of energy is like negative 95%.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Sales of energies, green energies, electricity in particular, you go back 6-7 years and we were approaching $75 a megawatt hour, and those rates have fallen every single year. Looking to 2020, we're down to about $34 and some pennies.
So through the chair of the administration, essentially, then, we're facing increased competition from green energy sources. Is that correct, through the chair?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that and the fact that the hydrofracking in our nation has produced an overabundance of natural gas. So that is also generating competition, driving the rates down.
Well, that just complicated my narrative. I was going to say, we're paying the price for, being green, we're going for green energy sources, but on the other hand, those frackers, they're competing with us too. So we're just facing a lot of competition, and I would imagine for the foreseeable future, this isn't gonna change. Is that correct, through the chair?
Mr. Chairman, I don't protect the commodities market or the stock market. I would rather not comment on where energy prices may go in the future.
Okay, I'm willing to state for the record that I think that's not gonna change anytime soon. But I did have a question about the other revenue solid waste. That's also down, not so much from last year, but in that same time frame of about 5 years, it is down about just under 20%. My question is, over the last couple of years, why is that, if you know? And then what is other revenues, through the chair?
Well, Mr. Chairman, a lot of the other revenues are also matched with expenses. A lot of these revenues are passed through. For example, the revenue and expenses associated with the various host agreements, Byron Bergen Fire Department, Bergen School District, the Riga host fee, Bergen host fee, the recycling center host fee. A lot of those change as the expenses change. So you'll see reductions on both sides of the equation there. We also have within other revenues, City of Rochester recycling rebate, sludge tipping fees that are reimbursed from Northwest Quadrant and Van Laer. They have small amount of interest earnings, and not necessarily small, but $315,500 in minor sales and recyclables. Now, of course, revenue from recyclables has also been dropping over the past several years.
Yes, through the chair of the administration, I was going to ask about that. The revenues for recyclables is going down. Is that part of the other revenues, solid waste?
It is part of the other revenues, Mr. Chairman.
And do you have an idea, just with the 2020 budget or the 2019 amended either way, what is the amount of money that we've done from recycling in terms of other revenues, through the chair?
Through the chair, we have two sources of income from our recyclables. The residential curbside recycling, which is processed at the recycling center, generates $6.50 a ton. We're projecting conservatively that we'll have about 39,000 tons, so that would yield approximately $253,500 in revenue. From the RRF, which is a transfer haul operation, as you know, the residential side, that's operated by Waste Management. The transfer haul operation, which is situated on the same property but in a different building, the blue building, that's operated by Cascades Recovery. We do derive some revenue based on their operations there for industrial and commercial institutional recycling, and we expect to generate $36,000. So in aggregate, we expect to generate about $290,000 in revenue from our recycling processing.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, it's my recollection that our contract with Waste Management included terms that made the Waste Management vulnerable to pricing changes and not the county. Is that correct, through the chair?
Through the chair, we are not subject to any volatility in the market as relates to the rate of revenue we earn through the tons processed and sold.
Right. So through the chair of the administration, then I would expect that the amount of money we're making, about $253,000, would stay relatively constant over the years, at least through the term of this contract. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. The really only variable there would be tons.
Sure. And then finally, through the chair of the administration, when is that contract up? Because I can't imagine I want to do that again.
Through the chair, that contract will be up at the end of 2022.
Good to know. I'm writing that down because that's going to come up again, I'm sure. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that information. Okay, so I think I know the answer to this question as well. On page 699, line 410205, miscellaneous revenue, it's going from 6.4 to 4 million. That's due to the reduction that we put in place on the tipping fees. Is that correct, through the chair?
Page 695, Mr. Chairman.
699.
And Mr. Chairman, the revenue line is miscellaneous revenue, 410205.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, there's actually quite a number of items within miscellaneous revenue. The biggest decline would be our electricity sales and net revenue from waste management. That was in excess of 2.6 million and now is slightly in excess of $500,000.
So
It's a little misleading, Mr. Chairman, because you may recall that we used to budget the gross expense and the revenue sharing from sales of electricity. We actually pay Waste Management to operate the facility for us, so our budget was grossed up, both revenue and expense. The debt on Gas Plant 1 was paid off in full during 2019. With the extinguishment of the debt, ownership actually transfers to Waste Management. We're no longer grossing up our budget for all the revenue and the expense. We're on now, with the transfer of ownership, only budgeting our share of the revenue.
that makes sense. Very confusing, but it makes sense. Okay, thank you. So through the chair of the administration, I want to move on to pure waters, if at all possible. And I want to start off with something that's a little bit, it's on topic, but I want to know, did the recent awarding from of the READY function funding, so Lake Ontario Resiliency and Economic Development Initiative, did that affect Pure Water's future plans at all? Did they pay for things that we would otherwise have to pay for? Or is there no effect on us from that those awards? And I could list a number of projects where there very well might be an effect through the chair.
Through the chair, no, there would not be an impact to Pure Waters.
So this, what the state has done is separate from or in addition to anything that we might be doing in terms of our capital expenditures, correct, through the chair?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, that's unfortunate, but I was hoping. Okay, so through the chair of the administration, one of the things I did, I just looked at page 57, and we're looking at the Pure Water's actual net position, and then I went back in time and checked out, you know, what was our net position in the past. And if you do that, going back 5-6 years, we go from having a net position of about $200 million to having a net position of, in 2018, of $104 million. And similar things hold true for the restricted and unrestricted proportions of these net positions. Why is it that our net position has declined 50% over the last 5-6 years through the chair?
So, Mr. Chairman, I do happen to have the 2018 CAFR, and I see Pure Water's net position of, in total, $104 million. Can you please, Mr. Chairman, repeat what you're seeing from several years ago?
Well, for example, so yeah, I have the same number for 2018, and if you go to 2017, it was 122.3 million, in 2016, 138.8 million, and so on and so forth. If you go back to 2012, it was 216.3 million. And so I'm just wondering, it's a clear and steady decline year over year, and why is that the case through the chair?
Mr. Chairman, there's probably a variety of answers that will go into that, and I probably will have to give you a more fully developed response in writing. However, I will note that, let me grab a different set of notes. So, Mr. Chairman, A portion of the reduction in net position is attributable to the increasing OPEB liability over time.
Excuse me, the increasing what liability?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, OPEB, other than pension, it's really retiree health insurance,
Okay.
other than other post-employment benefits. There's also a change in our net assets invested in capital. That's a more complex formula. The value of the capital assets we bring online get depreciated over time. So we will see a net investment in capital assets that is reduced as we incur depreciation expense. Our depreciation expense is really over the course, depending on the asset, could be anywhere from 20 to 40 years. However, our bonds are paid off in 20 years, so there's a difference we always have to account for in that discrepancy.
So, through the
There-
chair, if I could, I want to grab that thought. That would then explain, I think, over the same time frame where I talked about it, the net position going down by 50%, the restricted part of the net position has gone down more quickly, more like 60%, but the unrestricted portion has gone up, and it's increased. It's more cash on hand by about 20% over the same period of time. And that would be because of depreciation primarily of our major projects, and then the lack of having to pay off the debt service on those huge projects back from the 90s or so, through the chair?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and with the switch over to cash capital, that change from year to year should be a little more rapid, as the net investment in capital assets is reduced by the value of outstanding bonds, and by switching to cash capital funding for our general improvements, we won't have that debt to reduce our net investment.
Okay, so through the chair of the administration, I realize this is looking to the future, but my concern when I looked at this was, the pathway of the last 6 years was to lose a net position of about, $110 million, meaning we have another 6 years to go before we run out of money. But clearly that's not the case. But I guess my question is, given the fact we have increasing post-employment benefits that are leading this decline in cash reserves or net position, but we are not paying off bonds as much from those huge projects in the 90s, where do you see us being 4 or 5 years from now in terms of our net position? Is one larger than the other, is what I'm asking, through the chair.
Our CAFR, Mr. Chairman, reports the Pure Waters districts in totality, all 4 districts. I do know that in the Rochester district, our decline in the net investment in capital assets is really driven by high depreciation. So we will see that coming down a little more quickly than the other districts. With the Northwest Quadrant, we do see improvement in our net investment in capital assets, but that basically, even though that's primarily driven by a reduction in depreciation expense within Northwest, and with debt service principal payments remaining somewhat constant in Northwest, that is driving an improvement there. Again, Mr. Chairman, it's hard to predict the future, but most of the districts are doing okay. That's not to say there aren't any concerns. This body has heard from Director Garland over years that Gates-Chili-Ogden district is a small district with a relatively low number of households supporting the cost of that district. We have concerns there. Northwest Quadrant, right now we're seeing okay operations, but they need to bring their debt service down, because right now the capital assets are at or a little upside down in terms of debt to value. Arundequoit Bay South Central is actually in decent financial shape. Rochester Pure Waters District is in decent financial shape. So I think the challenge facing the Pure Waters leadership, the legislature, and the operating managers are balancing the operations among the 4 districts.
Okay. I realize it's a tough question, but I was just looking for what the increase in decline for this time around, and that's why it came to mind. Thank you for what you had to share. I appreciate that. Okay. Just give me a second. On page 132, under performance measures, what caused the 2019 estimated increase in biochemical oxygen demand and the total suspended solids? And to be frank, what have we done to remedy this? Through the chair. Page 132.
Through the chair, we project our estimates based on rolling 3 and sometimes 5-year averages to predict where we expect to go. Those deviations aren't significant and are well within the means that we would expect to see on an annual basis, both for BOD and TSS.
Okay, I'm gonna take it to word and say they're not significant. That's correct, right, through the chair?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, I'll take that, fair enough. Okay, on page 133, just mentioning there aren't any performance measures for Irondequoit, and I mentioned this last year as well. What is the reason for that, through the chair?
Through the chair, Irondequoit is primarily a conveyance district, so it's less operationally intensive than, say, Rochester, GCO, and Northwest, based on the level of service in those other 3 districts. Irondequoit really has the lowest level of service if you compare treatment, conveyance, and collection. It's only a conveyance district, so we have not generated performance measures specifically to that district.
Okay, thank you. Now on page 136, under performance measures for the Rochester district, there was a significant decline for estimated 2019 for the tons processed biosolids metric tons measurement. And this is a bit of a surprise. Why was that decline occurred, through the chair? Under other indicators.
Through the chair, you might recall we have a test clarifier under construction in 2019, and we adjusted those numbers accordingly.
I guess my question then is, through the chair, I realize we have the test facility in place, but so if that had not been the case, it seems to me we would have processed, about 3,000 tons more, and that 3,000 tons wouldn't have just gone away. So I guess my question is, what happened to the 3,000 tons, even though we have a test facility, through the chair? If that makes sense.
Through the chair, we return sludge and we waste sludge within the plan itself, and that reflects our calculation based on an increased amount. So we would, in that case, would be recycling more, returning more of the activated sludge with that clarifier down.
And through the chair of the administration, I'm assuming there's no negative effects to doing that?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So through the chair of the administration, then why don't we do that all the time?
Through the chair, that's the process that we're using on a temporary basis, and we'll do that sequentially throughout the balance of the construction of the secondary clarifiers. It's not optimal. We can manage that through the process itself, but ideally, we want all 6 clarifiers upgraded and in line and available to us for processing. Again, it's a multi-year, multi-phase project.
Okay, so through the chair of the administration, and that was the thing I was wanting to understand. It's not optimal, but it's not a horrible thing either. It's just we want to perform more efficiently, and if we were, the numbers would be higher.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, fair enough. I think it's my last question, really. Under fleet maintenance, page 139, just a quick thing. Am I correct to think that other revenue used to be called miscellaneous revenue?
You know, it might have been, Mr. Chairman. That really is, the biggest components of other revenue is our insurance reimbursements and the sale of recyclables.
And the sale of recyclables is,
Probably small, Mr.
But-
Chairman.
I thought it was like 60, didn't we already talk about that? I could have sworn, there's like 60,000, something like that.
There is still some minor revenue from that within the fleet maintenance division.
Oh, separate then.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't realize, thank you. 1 second. Okay, and then finally, just to ask, for the appropriated fund balance, which is new, on page 139 for the fleet maintenance, I believe you mentioned this in your presentation. Could you please elaborate on that, please?
Mr. Chairman, every penny you see on page 139 appropriated fund balance is specifically from the county's reserve for bonded debt. The reserve for bonded debt arises from prior capital projects that we have borrowed against, and perhaps the actual project cost came in under the required borrowing, so that excess cash must be transferred to a reserve for bonded debt account. It can only be used for future debt service of that particular capital fund.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate your, answering all the questions I have. I'll probably have a few more ways and means, but I do this now so we don't do it then. Thank you.
Any other questions from the floor? The next item on the agenda will be the approval of the minutes. You have the September 24th, 2019 minutes of the Environmental Public Works Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk?
Referral 19-0284.
Moved by Legislator Wilt, seconded by Legislator DeFlorio. Any discussion? Legislator Wilt.
Yes, through the chair. Can this contract be amended or changed if something unexpected comes up within the next 10 years?
Through the chair, yes, this is an annual contract through the State Department of Transportation, just to reassure the legislature and the state government that the 5% that they kick in for airport-related projects, 90% of the projects are FAA, 5% state, 5% Monroe County Airport Authority, will be used accordingly and appropriately.
Thank you.
Legislator Baroff.
That was a great question. One other question, and that was, when do we expect these projects to begin, through the chair?
Through the chair, we expect the projects to continue into 2020. Some of the projects have been completed in 2019.
Thank you.
Hearing no other questions, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 19-0285.
Moved by Legislator DeFlorio, seconded by President Carbone. Is there any discussion? Legislator Baroff.
Thank you. Through you to the chair, the referral mentions our airport pavement management study. When was that completed, through the chair?
Through the chairman, the pavement management study was conducted about 5 years ago, and we are due to have an updated one either in 2020 or 2021.
So through the chair to the administration, but we're confident that in terms of what we're doing now, this airport study plan is up to date enough, correct, through the chair?
Through the chairman, that is correct.
Good. And then finally, through the chair, this project was scheduled to be considered at the planning board on the 21st. I'm assuming that happened. Was it positively reviewed through the chair?
Through the chairman, there was a positive discussion on it, but I will let council elaborate a little bit more.
Through the chairman, quorum did not show up, so a presentation was made, and the meeting has been rescheduled for Tuesday. I believe it's the 3rd of December.
Which is before, okay, so before the next ledge meeting.
Through the chair, it will be before the next meeting.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 19-0286.
Moved by President Carbone, seconded by Legislator Wilt. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 19-0287.
Moved by Legislator Wilt, seconded by Legislator DeFlorio. Legislator DeFlorio.
Yes, through you to the administration. Do we have any statistics that, or data pointing to the effectiveness of the Stormwater Coalition in terms of mitigating pollutants?
Through the chair, the primary effectiveness of the coalition is to really eliminate redundancy within other municipalities who have regulatory obligation to report on performance, projects, and other efforts through their MS4 permit. There are a number of ongoing projects that are undertaken by each of those communities to improve water quality within their communities, as well as Monroe County as a whole. But the coalition was created to minimize redundancy and eliminate duplication of effort amongst those municipalities who had an obligation to meet their permit requirements on an annual basis.
So through the chair to the administration, then the coalition doesn't make any recommendations or do anything other than coordinate services, or?
The coalition works very collaboratively together throughout the county to identify priorities within the county, how they'll work together to develop a consistent message. As you know, within the coalition, the public education outreach is very critical. You see the billboards, you see the signs, and that's really one, I think, of the most visible positive outcomes from the coalition, is because that's available now to all coalition members. They didn't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, to be able to create that. There isn't one number that they're tied to. If there is a technical issue that might be within a particular watershed that might overlap multiple municipalities, those municipalities will work together to try to work towards addressing it. But they have the coalition. They have a mechanism and a venue by which they can vet those challenges and share their experiences.
Thank you. So here's just one last question then, just in terms of, they don't do any kind of overall collection of data or information to see how effective their joint efforts are in reducing pollution in terms of overall for the county?
Through the chair, information, whether it's technical or programmatic, that's developed by each of the MS4s in those municipalities is filed with the state in an annual report. The state can then use that information to assess the health of the water resources within the county.
Thank you.
Legislator Baroth.
Through you to the administration, I know the county provides staff and other in-kind services in lieu of paying a fee. How many annual hours do we contribute to the coalition, through the chair?
Through the chair, we provide the equivalent of 2 FTEs.
Thank you. And through the chair of the administration, when you mention other in-kind services, could you give an example, through the chair?
Through the chair, some of the support space, we utilize vehicles to conduct certain evaluations, investigations, and other resources that the staff have available to them.
Thank you. And then finally, through the chair of the administration, in which department are these two FTEs located?
Through the chair, they're located within Pure Waters in the industrial waste group.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 19-0302.
Moved by legislator DeFlorio, seconded by President Carbone. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 19-0303.
Moved by President Carbone, seconded by legislator Wilt. Is there any discussion? Legislator Barra.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, just so I understand correctly, this reflects a $1 million increase over the prior funding arrangement. And is it correct through the chair that the county therefore has to pay an additional 5% of that $1 million or $50,000? Is that correct through the chair?
Through the chairman, that is correct.
Thank you. I'm assuming that's on hand and we have it covered in the 2020 budget. Is that correct through the chair?
Yeah. Through the chairman, that is correct, and the authority reimburses the county.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 19-0314.
Moved by legislator Wilt, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Are there any questions? Legislator DeFlorio.
Through the chair for the administration, could you please explain why this is coming to us as a matter of importance?
Through the chair, we were reviewing and finalizing details of the scope of this project and finalized the scope associated with service to the community hospital in 111 Westfall.
So has the scope changed since the contract was previously?
Yeah. Through the chair, the Iola cogeneration facility provided electricity as well to and steam to MCC, and they are no longer going to be serviced under this O&M agreement. They're going to continue to operate and maintain that facility on their own. They have the resources to be able to do that. So they're going to continue to utilize those cogen facilities to support the Brighton campus.
So the scope has decreased for this particular contract then?
Through the chair, that is correct. The focus of this contract will be for Monroe Community Hospital in 111 Westfall. It's in a total of 3 years, with 1 year initially and 2 additional years.
Thank you. And so through the chair to the administration, can you just let us know how many other respondents you had to the RFP?
Through the chair, Siemens was the only respondent to the RFP.
Thank you. And then through the chair to the administration, is there, have you looked at providing this service in-house as opposed to putting it out?
Yep. Through the chair, as you may know, the reason that we have a short-term contract here is so that we can complete the physical plant that's in the CIP. You've seen that will provide steam and hot water to the community hospital in 111 Westfall. We will go back onto utility electric for those facilities as well too. That was part of a thorough study and evaluation of the cogeneration facility, which you know has been in operation since 2003. This really represents sort of the final chapter, if you will, of the cogeneration facility at the site at Iola. It will move across the street to a new boiler facility. But we need a contract in place to be able to get us to that point. We have a total of potentially 3 years, but we expect to have the project completed within 2 years so that we can end this contract.
And then through the chair of the administration, then this complex would be decommissioned?
Yep. Through the chair, this contract would end. Those facilities would no longer be needed by the county for service.
Thank you.
Legislator Barra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the administration, is the old contract we had for the cogeneration agreement less than the new cost of $1.2 million through the chair?
Through the chair, as you know, the county inherited that former contract. This is the first time that we put the contract out, and it is more now for this contract than it was before in the long-term contract.
Thank you. Could you say how much more through the chair?
Through the chair, we saw a significant cost increase from Siemens when we were originally contemplating servicing both MCC and the county facilities. Approximately, the cost for the county in 2019 will be about $1.3 million. As you can see, our contract just to support service for the community hospital and 111 Westfall is about that amount. But again, we know that it's a short-term contract. It's at the end of its useful life, if you will. So there's challenges associated with a smaller contract. It does require 24/7 operation within the city of Rochester. There's a certain skill set and understanding that group has to be able to keep that system functioning, and we felt that offered the county the best value in the short term, given the fact that we have a long-term plan to rebuild a new plant on the other side of the street.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, item carries. Are there any other matters to come before the committee? There being no other matters, the November 25th, 2019 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will be announced.